Stop, pause, politics, COVID-19, quarantine, unemployment, death. Hi, this is No One Go. You're listening to Bicara Minggu Ini, and this week we have Ivy Kwek from REFSA. So, a quick one, what does REFSA means?
Hi Norman. REFSA stands for Research for Social Advancement. We are a progressive think tank, and as our name suggested, we are trying to strive for social advancement through our research.
I think quite a number of people will know that recently one of the directors, Senator YB Lu Jin Tong is also one of the directors with REFSA, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the book was it's called The Great Reset for Malaysia. So we'll come to that sort of questions on that book later. It's a very interesting book. We'll discuss about resetting Malaysia, and yes, this is not post Malaysia. So don't worry about that. We are not hitting on Parti Muda yet. So both Ivy and I, to some of the listeners who have not known, right? Both Ivy and I, both of us actually worked with the previous administration under Pakatan Harapan. So it has been how many months since we left?
So that was March.
Yeah, we were
Now
jobless,
it's
right?
October.
But hey, no, talking about
been a long
joblessness,
time.
right? Talking about joblessness, you literally went back automatically straight back to work a month later.
Yeah, pretty much. I actually asked for a 2 weeks break in between my jobs, but MCO happened. I had some travel plans, but since MCO happened, I thought I might as well just start job lah.
So how are things since you left the administration? Back then, you were Special Functions Officer to Senator YB Lu Jin Tong, and now you are in REFSA as the Research Director. How are things now for the time being?
It's quite a big change of pace in the sense that it's a very different organization setup. Obviously, I think as you would know, in the previous ministries, there is a lot of procedures, a lot of processes, which I really appreciate because being in there really helped me to learn and appreciate the challenges that the bureaucrats and the policymakers have to go through to get certain things done, and it's definitely a very good experience for me. But obviously now as a think tank, we are much more flexible in terms of the way we work. We are trying to also influence the public discourse through a different method, through our research, through our advocacy. So I would say that I really see it as wearing different hats, but essentially trying to do the same things, which is to help in shaping the discourse of policy in the country.
Well, to those who don't follow, right, as a think tank can also influence in terms of public policy. So, although back then you were part of the government where you can actually dictate the policies within the ministry. So, we will go straight into politics here.
Okay.
But before we go into politics right here, right? So, looking at what has happened to Perikatan Nasional administration since them taking over. I don't care whether it's front door, back door, side door, legitimate. I know at the end of the day, it's still government after that we're gonna face anyway. How do you see things are going at the moment? Let's look at the policies itself, currently in managing COVID-19 pandemic, and how do we fare in cushioning the impact of pandemic in Malaysia as a whole?
I really see that Malaysia is facing a triple crisis at the moment. We have the health crisis, obviously caused by the COVID pandemic. We have the economic crisis that is brought by the pandemic itself. And at the same time, as you well know, we are also having a lot of political turmoil that is currently still unfolding in this country. I would say that despite all these challenges, Malaysia has fared quite well, and I think that a lot of these are kudos to the professionalisms of the people in the civil service, and also really the people of Malaysia showing a lot of solidarity towards each other. But obviously, there's still a lot of challenge ahead of us. Economy is not going to get better anytime soon. A lot of people is likely to lose their job or already have lost their jobs. So there's definitely a lot of things for us to work on while also sorting out our political issues and all that. And I think that as someone that is actually also researching on international relations, it is quite important for us to remember that while there are so many things going on in the domestic scenes, there are also a lot of things happening at the international scenes, and there are threats that Malaysia are facing that I think we shouldn't lose sight on as well.
When you talk about a triple threat, this is a triple threat of a disaster. But regionally, I mean, Malaysia looks really doing pretty well compared to the other neighboring countries. Yes, our R naught. Okay, when I'm referring R naught, here is referring to the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've been regarded as one of the best among the best countries in managing COVID-19 pandemic. However, I think we've been relegated because of we closed. I mean, because of political turmoils, and then that led to a spread of further spread of COVID-19 infection in the country, and as well as the. What we're seeing right now is reimposition of the government is reimposing CMCO, and that has definitely affected a lot of businesses right now. So right now, even back home in my home state in Kuching itself has been declared as a red zone. So emerging with more and more red zones. So now we would like to focus on the economic crisis. So an economic crisis that we had CMO impose a sort of like a lockdown throughout the country. And moratorium just ended last month, and many of our friends, young people, we have to start paying our credit loans this month onwards. What situation are we looking at?
I think that it will definitely not be an easy time for a lot of Malaysians. As you have said, the moratoriums actually, when it was in place, it has helped to ease a lot of the financial burdens for people, especially those who have their either lose their job or have their had a pay cut. I personally have a lot of friends that are suffering from pay cuts, and they're really struggling from they're just so worried about having to pay their loans again next month. So I think that is also why there have been calls for the moratorium to actually be continued. I think the sort of the follow on effect is that if people don't have disposable income, it obviously also affect in their ability to consume, and that actually have sort of a further impact on our consumer markets.
Looking at moratorium itself, right, for example, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. If people don't pay up their loans and credits, right, banks will not have enough money to actually have what we call as a fluid cash flow within the market itself. And people are not paying, people are not buying, the purchasing power is going down, property market has been badly affected as well. What's worse is the tourism industry, travel industry. It's almost been a year, and I think unfortunately Tourism Malaysia 2020 did not kick off at all, unfortunately.
It's very bad timing.
It's very, very bad timing. We've seen hotels close, people are losing jobs, retraining. I remember I was involved in one of the story with a friend of mine. It was published on Channel News Asia, where professionals had to relearn and retrain themselves. It becomes even harder for those who are age 14 in the senior positions. With this kind of workforce as well. But let's look at Malaysia. Even before MCO itself, Malaysia's workforce have been pretty much, we are very dependent on foreign labor workforce. And also, unfortunately, we're not attracting the right talents, even for Malaysian talents as well as foreign talents coming into the country for a more competitive workforce. What do you say about that?
I think the Malaysia economy has long been over-reliant on cheap labor that is provided by the migrant workers. It is a structural error that we never bothered to actually correct. But as the pandemic has showed us, these are some of the systemic vulnerabilities that we face, and because of the cheap labor that we got, our industries never actually have the motivation to go up the value chain. We do not transform, we do not digitalize as fast as we should. And in a way, I feel that this pandemic would be a very good opportunity for us to correct some of these mistakes. And I really like the word build back better, because as we are trying to overcome this pandemic, we need to be sure that we do not reinforce the mistake that we've done in the past, but we're actually trying to address some of these issues, such as you pointed out, the reliance on cheap labor. I mean, one of the greatest way for us to create jobs now is actually, really start to create more jobs for Malaysians that can pay decently. And I think that is a myth that Malaysians are, not willing to take up these 3D jobs, because I feel that with proper automations with a decent wage, a lot of Malaysians are actually willing to take up these jobs.
Looking at it, right, creating jobs cannot be created out of thin air. And the whole economic structure, the government policies, how attractive to startups, for example. And then, of course, Malaysia's workforce is powered up mostly by SMEs. 90% of the jobs offered here in Malaysia by the small medium enterprises. Unfortunately, our economy is pretty much still very reliant on commodities like palm oil, rubber, and all that. And do you think Malaysia is turning into a less competitive ground compared to other countries like Vietnam? Vietnam is now looking like Malaysia in the 80s. And what's interesting is that I remember mentioning this to Jalil. We're looking at the investments, foreign direct investments of the fintech. On the fintech itself, about 30+% of all these investments are in Vietnam, while 51% is in Singapore. Now, Malaysia itself is, we are slowing down. Do you think, are we slowing down in this kind of area? Creating jobs would be, people say, yeah, government can help with creating jobs, but does our economy and an environment itself is suitable to use this opportunity, a window of opportunity, as a catalyst of digitalization?
I'm sure you heard this before, that a lot of people say that Malaysia is in a middle income trap, because obviously we cannot compete with countries like Vietnam when it comes to sort of low
Cheap
labor cost. So we really need to think about how do we position ourselves, and also in terms of how do we create a niche area for ourselves.
So when you look at it, right, after reopening our economy post MCO, and now we're back in CMCO again, although there were fewer restrictions and all that, our unemployment rate remains at 4.7%, while labour market in Malaysia continue to expand. So what do you say about that, and how things will look like in this fourth quarter until the end of the year? Are the current policies by Perikatan Nasional effective in addressing unemployment and, yes, especially youth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the statistics shown by the Department of Statistics is definitely very worrying. I believe it's like 740,000 people have lost their job. I think that in this crisis, the most important first thing that the government should do is actually to help private sector to retain job retentions. Because as long as people have jobs, they are still pretty much manageable, and I think this is when the schemes like the wage subsidy schemes would be very, very useful. The government is doing that, but from what I heard, it is not quite enough, because they are only providing 600 per employee for a maximum of 200 employees, and I think a lot of industries are really struggling to keep their workers even with this wage subsidy programs.
But most of these are pretty much one-off kind of thing, and it will only last for a very short time.
That's right.
We compare our approach with Singapore. Do you think that we could actually adopt Singapore's approach, where they actually support in a longer term, longer period of time compared to a one-off kind of wage subsidy scheme? What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the assistance will need to be longer, and I believe they have extended it until the end of the year. But I think it will still be quite optimistic to think that things will get better
Yeah,
next year.
correct.
So if I may just ask so I think apart from retention, unemployment benefits will also be very important. So at the moment we have the EIS by SOCSO, but one very distinct shortcoming is that it does not include informal workers. So it does not include people that are doing gig jobs and all that.
I think not just gig jobs. There are a lot of Malaysians out there who rely on daily wage,
Yeah,
and
informal
gig jobs.
sectors.
Yeah, gig jobs includes those even Grab drivers. Are they being covered? What about those on contract base? They're working on their own, they're contract base. Do they have a social security policy in hand?
Yeah.
What about any support in terms of employment and things like that? These are part where we don't really discuss much, especially when it comes to policy making. So we don't really look at this sector. It's always like, okay, complaints by QPEX, not enough bonus, this, right? Every year in year out, we hear about the same thing from QPEX, right?
Yeah.
But those who are really suffering are those who are, they're based their salaries on base of guys pagi makan pagi lah. That kind of
yeah.
thing. So looking ahead, now we're shifting into next week. On Thursday, November 6th, the government will be tabling budget for 2021. What can you expect?
So from what I've read so far, the government seems to have a decent plan. So I think the three themes that they said they would be focusing on is economic resilience, business continuity, as well as the rakyat's prosperity. So I would say that if that's really where they are going towards, that would be sort of in the right track. I definitely would love to see the government spending more in the right sector, and also in strengthening the social safety net. So these are things that we talked about just now about the unemployment benefits, social security, and also in retaining jobs. But apart from that, I think it's also important that the government actually play a more active role as an economic driver to create more jobs. So whether this is temporary jobs or permanent jobs, I think that is secondary. But at least we need some quick wins where there are jobs that people can actually take part in. And one of the things that my team in REFSA we have been doing is actually to encourage the government to actually invest in sectors that can bring common goods. So things that like healthcare, educations. I think that there's a great demand for healthcare now for obvious reason. Education as well, because we will need more teaching assistants in sort of education teaching in the new normal. And obviously there are also people that have lost job that would be looking for reskilling and upskilling. So there will be people in the middle of their careers that are looking for these educational opportunities. So if these are some of the sectors that government can put more money in, and at the same time create more jobs for either teaching jobs or a sort of a medical person assistant kind of jobs, these would be opportunities for Malaysians.
I remember last year during Pakatan Harapan's government, they announced a policy called Malaysians at Work. And one of the key things is women at work. Unfortunately, due to the change of government from the Sheraton move in late February, we've not seen this policy in place. And the UN report has also shown us, even the World Bank report has also shown us that by putting more women into the workforce, as women now, my perception is that there are more and more women as breadwinners in a family. So, looking at budget 2021 itself, and also this government, are we putting in more women back to work? Are we allowing more women back to work? I mean, take for example, there are a lot of women out there who sacrifice their time, even take away from leave from job to raise the kids, and then they find it hard to return to work. And again, our culture, our society, and most of the businesses here, and they're very very patronage kind of thing, and most of the decision makers are men. That's one of the major problems, and people don't see the incentive of hiring women. But that's sort of, I would say that's sort of very lopsided, sexist. I try all the words, sexist lah, what lah. But the thing is, women can
Patriarchal.
Yes, women can actually multitask better. And in a lot of countries, right, where then encourage more women to go back to work, productivity of the company and then the outcome of that, right, is a lot better. And how does that actually impact the market and the economy, not just a microeconomy of a certain community itself, but as a whole in the country, where women are more prudent in spending. Yeah, of course, we will say, oh, women are actually going to online shopping. Not necessarily. It gets the money flow, okay? Buy local products. But when you look at
Stimulate
it,
the economy.
it's stimulating the economy.
Just
Means stimulating the economy means in a way that it helps other businesses to grow. So there's cash flow and all that. But do you see that happening in this new government in promoting more women going back to work?
I think there's a lot of great work that's being done by the women NGO like WAO in sort of putting forward some policies that can help women. I personally don't really deal with it at a very deep level, but I think that whether we like it or not, women is in the workforce, and I think the crisis will actually encourage or force more women to actually be a breadwinner as well, because the household income might have reduced and you might need more than one person bringing home the money. And at the same time, I think that, more people are working from home and there's a lot more pressures of childcare in the household. And unfortunately, I think that women still shoulder a bigger share of the burden compared to men.
Sorry to interject. Do you know that to all the listeners out there, if you're following, right, childcare is very, very expensive. Even in nurseries, very, very expensive. And that's why a lot of parents do think that they just want to raise their own kids at home. But then there's no opportunity for a lot of businesses to allow women to work from home. So now, businesses have no reasons not to, right?
Yeah. So in a way, maybe there's a silver lining because, there's
But we have to
crises
check. We have to check on all these companies. If they don't allow them, we have to call them out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
No, this kind of situation where we got to have more and more women back to work. At the end of the day, we just need to allow more people to go back to work, and businesses will start running. And now, from the budget, we have seen what happened. Now we go to the spicy part of it, politics. So from Sabah election to the numbers game in pursuit for power in Putrajaya. So how do you feel the current dynamics of politics in Malaysia?
Oh God. I'm sure that I'm not the only person that will feel frustrated about this whole process, because I think there's a sense of helplessness as a Malaysians. It's as if like we can't really do anything about it, and it's being dictated by certain personalities in the sort of power play. But I always believe that politics should be about uplifting the well-being of the people, and to do that, we need to talk about policies. So I think that we need to come back to the essential business of politics, which is to make good policies and make lives of the people better. So yes, I know that it's very frustrating for a lot of us out there, but it is definitely very crucial for us to keep remembering that we are the one that will keep them in check. We're the one that will keep them accountable, and we need to constantly bring the politicians back to remembering that that's what they are for in the first place.
Yeah, and then if some of you have followed, consider this on Awani last night. Sharad and Melissa Idris, they were talking about, our parliament is just full of geriatrics. But I think it's just more than that. It's not just geriatrics. I think the politics itself is just, men, all men, bitter all men quarreling for power. It's just power, 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 position, power, and then the same people again, they fight again for more than 2-3 decades, right? It's like, oh gosh, can we just tell everyone? Can we finally have a female prime minister who's a
I
millennial?
know, right?
Right. Stop talking about having a Jacinta Ardern. Can we start putting our own people in the parliament? So I remember you want to talk about, before we got about the change in the regional powers, despite the advice from the Young Tuan Agong and all that, so will we be able to break the political impasse? Or is it going to be a continuous vicious cycle of playing musical chair like Game of Thrones?
I think that democracy is always messy and it's not a straightforward process.
And noisy?
Yeah, and noisy and confusing. But I think that we need to insist that whoever that is in power at the moment need to put in some institutional reforms that will last and that will withstand political changes. And I think that is essentially what mature democracy is. Like in the past few weeks, we have been discussing about who is the legitimate government and whatnot. But I feel that we need to go beyond that, and we need to go talk about what kind of parliament that we want. Is there a space for co-governing between the oppositions and the government? I think that one thing that we are really, really weak of is actually our parliament. And I know that in the past few years, there are some lawmakers that are trying to put in some reforms, but unfortunately, it's still not really happening fast enough. But things like having parliamentary select committee that can actually scrutinize the bills in details and not just the very superficial level of just
being a rubber stamp.
But rubber stamp and just A and nays according to your party lines, but actually being able to look at the details, propose some changes. The proposal can come from backbenchers or oppositions. Things like making certain important appointments have to go through the parliament confirmations. So things like that will actually strengthen our parliamentary institution, and in a way it's giving back the power to people, and it's a way to actually check the power of the whoever that is the government of the day.
How I wish to have these parliamentary select committee meetings or hearings to be live on Facebook, to be live on YouTube. Something like, we've seen in the States when you have the House of Representatives and Senate confirmation hearings. They have it live on TV and we don't do it. There's a lot of bit of hush-hush. We don't know what's talking about. And there's no accountability in how we appoint this. I will throw this question because both of us have actually been in the last administration anyway. So yeah. So I'm going to throw this question. Do you think that no matter what, both sides has no political will to institute reforms in the country? I'm trying to put both on the pedestal now because it seems like during PH time, of course, it's really unfair to say that 22 months they did not institute reforms. They tried, but in certain things they should have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the past administration did try, but unfortunately, I think that they were kind of distracted as well by other things and
external factors are political.
Politicals. A lot of racial sentiment being played out as well, and people are very sensitive because we just tend to racialize a lot of issues. This is very unfortunate, but I think we just have to recognize that this is where our society is. We definitely have to work on this when it comes to, especially on racial relations. But yeah, I mean, I feel that change is not straightforward and it's not immediate. So.
Yeah, when you talk about change, I remember paying for my parking at BSC the other day. So I put in money and it says change is possible.
Yeah, that's like the most encouraging parking auto pay machine ever.
Yes, change is possible. But then again, right, when we look at it, when we look at regional changes right now, we've seen what happened in Hong Kong. What happened in Hong Kong, right, to me, we should be encouraged by that. It all happened with just 14-year-old kid, Joshua Wong, with Demo Sisto, as a student who really, go out to the streets. Of course, here will say, hey, why you want kids don't go school, and then you go out to the streets and start protesting the government. No, democracy is what people really, really fought. People really fight for democracy. People may say, oh, democracy is not working lah. I might as well become a communist country like China. Everything works so fine. I said, no, not exactly. Why Malaysia is formed, I think people really need to think back again. The Federation of Malaysia was formed on the basis of people actually died fighting for democracy. Now, with the growing dissatisfaction by people towards the government, we've seen that happening in Bangkok, Jakarta, now still ongoing in Hong Kong. What is your reading of how this situation affecting Malaysia? How these dynamics are going on in this region?
I think that Malaysians have actually showed that we can be united before. I'm sure you were part of protests like Bersih and all that. So it is not as if like Malaysians are incapable of that. Looking at what happened around the region, I think you're right. When the people are actually angered enough and they are motivated enough to actually come out to the streets to risk everything they have, it means that something is very wrong and people cannot take it anymore. In Malaysia, I feel that maybe that sentiment hasn't reached that boiling point yet at the moment, but it's not to say that we have not done it before. And I would also say that, in fact, if you look at just the last few months during the pandemic, there are a lot of voices, pressures that were that happened in Twitter, for example, which I sort of take it as the playground of a lot of Malaysian young Malaysians, and you see that a lot of the grouses that actually been picked up by the government. So I think that there was like a lot of issues about how the universities were closed at a very short notice, and a lot of people were making noise about it. And then I think the government responded and made some changes to the rules. So things like that. So I feel that these are actually evidence that collective actions actually can bear fruit. But I guess the issue is, how do we bring this offline to actually do something more engaging at the community level.
But wouldn't it be more negatively impacting in how policy making is being in the process of policy making in that way, because that would just be a more reactionary kind of policy making. To me, in my opinion, that has lack of concrete substance itself. It means when people react, then you change the policy, and if another person react, then you just fall back to the old policies again. This is becoming in my opinion, it becomes a very weak, doesn't have the strong pillar of how policy making is in the country. Now, looking at this, right, how do we learn from what's going on around us from our neighbors in resetting Malaysia? That's the crux of the question. Not from a book, not written by Jian Tong, but I want to hear from Ivy.
That's a very good question. I feel like 2020 is really a year of reflection, at least for me at the personal level.
You just want to reset 2020 all over again, right? Restart 2020.
Yeah, like erase it maybe. But I think that when we say reset, we also mean that the old ways of doing things no longer works, and that applies for how we have been operating our economy. We know that we cannot leave it to the market anymore. We know that the government needs to step in and play a much more constructive role in creating jobs and making sure that people's well-being are taken care of, that there will not be inequality. That's another thing that very likely to happen, is that inequality might increase after this crisis because people are unevenly affected. And this also applies to our politics. We are so used to this old politics of personality and patronage, and we need to do something about that. So to me, that is what reset is all about, and this is what we need to talk about. What kind of Malaysia we want after the pandemic, and we shouldn't just be talking about going back to how things were, but really taking this opportunity to build back better. So I think that we also mentioned just now about education and healthcare needing an extra boost. The other thing that we didn't talk about was also in the sector of green economy.
Sustainable Development Goals,
Sustainable
SDG.
Development Goals. Like we shouldn't forget all these things because as much as COVID is the immediate threat right now, we have a climate change that is also going to be something that we have to deal with in the past. So that to me would be what I want to see as we are trying to get out of the crisis.
Yeah, there you hear it from Ivy talking about resetting Malaysia, sometimes rebooting our mindset in building the whole country. And so I remember when I was in US for the ACYPL program, where Ivy was also part of ACYPLC, both of us
There's so much similarities.
Yeah, but given the kind of experiences when we were in the ACYPL program in the States, I was there during midterms, and I was amazed to see 14-year-olds. They can't vote yet, but what they did, I saw them in Boston, was that they go out and tell those voters is that you are voting on behalf of our future, and they are trying to persuade them to vote. This kind of thing, the participatory democracy is not what we are experiencing here in Malaysia. Not that much, but we're seeing some uptick.
I think we are getting better.
We're getting there. I mean, stop talking bad about Parti Muda. We should be encouraging more, not just Parti Muda. I mean, all young people should participate as, strive to be a policymaker. You can be an NGO, you can be a lobbyist.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the same goal is to see Malaysia as a better country than anyone else. But of course, we're not going to make Malaysia great again. Malaysia itself is already great. So it's how you improve on it. So on that note, right, that where Ivy shared with us here is that you got to remember, resetting Malaysia is not going back to the old ways. Resetting Malaysia is reimagining what Malaysia is in future.
Or
what
can be.
Can be, exactly. So that's the end of our interview today. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for the budget tabling next week, I think political drama, the Game of Thrones will still be going on. I think this afternoon we have another meeting with Pakatan Harapan Presidential Council is going on this afternoon. If you're listening, might be tomorrow. Yeah. So you're listening to Bicara Minggu Ini, uncovering current affairs and politics, and you can listen to the stories and interviews on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts on iTunes. For more updates and stories, if you have any suggestions, you can tweet to me at I'mNamGo. If you want to follow Ivy, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Kwek, KWEKI.
So if you have any questions, you can ask about REFSA. If you have any interest about probably joining REFSA or work together at REFSA, and you can always contact Ivy. Thank you for listening.